Hey friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the channel. So, big news today. A guy who's been with the WWE since 2011. Cesaro has left the WWE, as reported by PW Insider today, corroborated by Fightful Select. Cesaro, guy who's been with the company since, September of 2011. Could not come to an agreement with the WWE. He's been on like a 1-year contract extension. He re-signed for a year about a year ago. And the two sides apparently could not come to an agreement. And so Cesaro is leaving the WWE. He heads out onto a pretty impressive pro wrestling free agent market. There's a ton of talent out there, either unsigned or what have you. There's a bunch of companies right now that are doing very well. And so he's going to have a lot of options for him. Let's be honest. WWE has not used Cesaro nearly to what his potential probably is, although they have actually used him. I was looking at his cage match profile here, and look, none of this stuff is all that impressive. The last match he had in WWE seemingly was about 2 weeks ago. Happy Corbin defeated Cesaro on SmackDown. Before that, he was in sort of a really loose tag team with Ricochet. He was at, he's been used. He's used on the live show circuit. He actually was racking up some wins with some people. Cesaro and who is this? Ricochet, Cesaro, Ivar was teaming with them for like some 6-man stuff. So it's not like WWE didn't use him. They used him. It's just they never used him in a prominent spot. Ever since he had that feud with Roman Reigns a year after Mania, WrestleMania Backlash, I think was his match. They didn't use the guy. Not really to his standards. Cesaro's always been one of the most creative, interesting wrestlers in the ring, and the fact that he has spent the last 10 plus years, 11 years now in the WWE, and he still is a pretty impressive and creative and fun wrestler to watch is pretty impressive. He doesn't phone it in. The guy never does. So he's entering a wrestling landscape where his strengths really don't lie in the WWE. Let's face it, if you're in the WWE, you need to be able to connect as a character with the fans. At least that's what Vince McMahon really wants. Somebody who can connect as a character. And that's one thing that Cesaro's kind of always lacked. In my opinion, this is coming from me, I've never been that drawn to the guy as a character because he just comes off as just dude, right? He's a phenomenal wrestler. And so I'm actually kind of looking forward to more what he can do outside of WWE than if he was still with the company. So I put up a list. I got a list here of sort of the best case and worst case scenarios for Cesaro with all the various locations that he could end up. Of course, the one location that he could end up is just on the independent ranks doing whatever he wants, going from company to company. In that case, best case scenario is he gets to travel a lot and he doesn't get tied down to one place, and so he's not misused. The worst case is he's also not going to be champion anywhere. He's not going to have a home base. He won't really get pushed. He'll be more enhancement level. So I don't know about any of that. But if he decides to sign with any of the major promotions running today, there's upside, there's downside. I do think that his strength, which is just really, really good professional wrestler, would work in any of these places. But it sort of depends on what he wants to do, where he wants to go. How big of a fish does he want to be? So let's start off with that. AEW obviously is a place I think that immediately springs to mind. People are like, oh, okay, he's going to jump ship. He's just going to go over to AEW. Number one, there's the question of if Tony Khan would actually sign Cesaro. He's not going to be the kind of guy who commands like CM Punk, John Moxley money, I don't think. I'd be really hard pressed to think that. I'll be honest with you. I'm not even sure you'd sign him over like Keith Lee. Keith Lee's already signed with AEW, but I feel like with Keith Lee, you might want to open up the checkbook a little bit. For Cesaro, I just don't know, because besides being really good pro wrestler, I'm not sure what else he brings to the table which is great. Being a really good pro wrestler is great. But the thing about AEW is that there are already so much really, really great in-ring talent. I feel like the best case scenario for Cesaro in AEW is TNT champion. Maybe sort of hitting the ceiling. His ceiling would be like where we've already seen Miro. If they could get some sort of story out of him that's interesting, maybe like where Miro has been, which was pretty good TNT champion. I think that's not a terrible ceiling for him. I personally think Miro's actual ceiling is much higher than it is, and I think he was on that ascent before he got injured. I think Miro's ceiling at this point is probably AEW World Champion because he's awesome. But I think best case scenario, Cesaro could be TNT champion. But AEW is a crowded house. There's a ton of people there. His worst case is Jay Lethal, the guy who's been on like cable TV once since his debut. I think he had that Rampage match against Ricky Starks. I think that's like it. He does a lot of work on Dark and Elevation. And I doubt that Tony Khan would spend a bunch of money to bring Cesaro in, only to have him work a bunch on Dark and Elevation. So that's kind of the worst case scenario for Cesaro if Tony Khan can't figure anything out to do with him, unless he were to do something like join in with Brian Danielson and Mox's new crew. Let's face it, that's happening after Revolution. They're totally going to team up and they're going to mentor people like Daniel Garcia. You bring Cesaro into that, you get yourself like a little wrestling school, basically. That's a potential situation there. But again, does Tony Khan want to pay the kind of money that Cesaro's probably going to ask for him to be sort of a third wheel to Brian and Mox? I don't know. Next up, the place that I actually would want to see, well, there's two places that I kind of would love to see Cesaro. By the way, we're going to have to start calling him Claudio. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to keep on referring to him as Cesaro, but at some point we're going to have to call him Claudio because that's his name. That's what he's going to probably go by. Anyways, New Japan Professional Wrestling. That's kind of the place where I want to see him end up. If he wants to go to Japan, hang out there a while. There's all sorts of great stuff for him to do there. There's a ton of great matches. Who wouldn't want to see him in the G1? He could go all the way. He could do really great things in New Japan. There's a ton of dream matchups for him there. Imagine him, just top of my head, him and Zack Sabre Jr. Come on, that match would be amazing. That would be great. I'd love to see Zack Sabre Jr. dump Taichi and become a tag team with Cesaro. That would be awesome. New Japan really likes really good wrestlers. They tend to reward really good wrestlers by putting titles on them. The best case scenario for Cesaro, to be completely honest with you, in my opinion, is IWGP World Champion. I could absolutely see that happening 100%. He's a really good wrestler. He doesn't need to be the sports entertainment personality that, you'd have to be in WWE to succeed. So I totally think that's absolutely possible. I think he would absolutely thrive in New Japan. They like really good wrestlers. At the same time, they have a lot of really good wrestlers there. Worst case scenario for him, he's in House of Torture, which is, of course, the worst thing that New Japan has, which I also really like because they generally don't do really bad sports entertainment gimmicks, and House of Torture is exactly that. So, yeah, that's the worst case for him. He could end up in House of Torture. Moving on. GCW. Of course, they've got a bunch of, they're doing some really cool stuff right now. Matt Cardona, former WWE guy, might be kind of a template, although he's more of a personality, sort of making fun of the whole sports entertainment thing over there. I don't know how much of a deathmatch guy Cesaro would be, although GCW does a lot more than just death matches. They do plenty of death matches, but they do a lot of other stuff. And they would be lucky to have a guy who's as good a wrestler as Cesaro is. I mean, best case scenario there, he could be GCW World Champion. Who's their World Champion right now? Who is their GC? Who is the GCW? Oh, Mox is the GCW champion right now. Yeah, Mox versus Cesaro. Yeah, Mox dropped that title, Cesaro. Sure, why not? Let's see here. Next, NWA. I mean, I know Cardona's the champion right now. Best case scenario, Cesaro could show up and just beat Cardona for that title, and people might pay attention. The worst case for him is he'd win the NWA championship and nobody would pay attention. I mean, I'm sure Billy Corben has plenty of money, but I don't know how much he'd be willing to pay Cesaro because, it's kind of obvious as he doesn't have a huge budget for his talent there. Just saying. It's kind of a small operation. I like NWA though. Maybe I'll start watching at some point. And then finally, what if this? I kind of like this idea here. What if Ring of Honor actually does? Who apparently they are actually coming back in April. What if they have like a kick-ass reboot? What if their reboot is off the charts cool, and Cesaro is sort of their crown jewel? How cool would that be? What if Cesaro is the guy to take that Ring of Honor title off of Gresham and lead him and Gresham sort of, co-lead the new Ring of Honor to like new heights? That actually sounds kind of cool. They definitely need to freshen up like everything they do. But if the idea is Ring of Honor is going to go back to being this sort of, pure wrestling thing with like a freshened up presentation, who better to lead that particular charge than a guy who's like no nonsense pro wrestler? Cesaro, Claudio Castagnoli, him and Gresham and I don't know, a bunch of other dudes that are just really good wrestlers. I could see there being an appeal to that. Why wouldn't they want to throw a bunch of that Sinclair money at Claudio, at Cesaro, and have him sort of lead the charge? I think that could be really cool. And then, of course, there's Impact Pro Wrestling. I could see Impact somehow, some way. Impact always has plenty of money to throw around. I could see them going after Cesaro and maybe he being the guy that dethrones Moose. And maybe, just maybe, because I feel like Impact is like a couple of major players away from sort of moving up another level. And Cesaro could be that. I don't know how much of a needle mover he is. But if he puts on a bunch of buzzworthy matches and if he gets involved in storylines, which are equally buzzworthy, maybe he can help move the needle for Impact. And obviously his ceiling there is Impact World Champion. It's the kind of thing everybody wanted to see him as world champion, or a lot of people wanted to see him as world champion in WWE. I don't necessarily know that I was one of them, but I think that, to see him be world champion somewhere, specifically Impact, I think it would make a lot of sense. And we could see if they would get sort of the full, God, could you imagine him versus Josh Alexander? If Josh Alexander goes back to Impact, that'd be pretty amazing. That'd be pretty cool. I think I'd love to see that. Cesaro versus Moose. Maybe hell, Cesaro, he's not going to be in the X division. Come on. But yeah, I think Impact is a good option for him. He might get paid out of all these companies. He might get paid the most from Impact because they need to spend some money. They've been trying. Apparently they had tried to spend money on Bray Wyatt, on Braun Strowman. Speaking of Braun Strowman, what if Cesaro went to Control Your Narrative? I don't think that's going to happen. Anyways, let me know in the comments below what you think Cesaro, what he should do. Where should he go? Maybe he wants your advice. Maybe he's going to watch this video and be like, hey, let's see what these guys have to say about where I should go. You might be able to speak to Cesaro directly through our comments. Maybe. I don't know. Anyways, check out this video here. Gypsy's out there barking about something. I don't know what it is, so I got to go check on that. Thanks for watching, everybody. I appreciate it. Until next time, go check out this video.